Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajana Rajana Jasodanandana Brajajana Rajana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Thank you everyone for coming. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Okay, today we'll be reading from Bhagavatam, but before that, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Alright, today we'll be reading from the Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 46, Verse 31. Let's see, 31. The title of the chapter is Uddhava Visits Vrindavan. Let's see. Etau hi vishvasya cha bijayam. Let's see. Namo Mukunda Purusha Pradhanam. Amviya Bhuteshu Vilakshanasya. Yeah, they're doing cursive. Jnanasya Chesata Imao Puru Now. Yeah, I can't read the cursive. Etao He. Yeah, go ahead. We'll just do one. Etao He Vivasya Chabi Jamyom. Namo Mukunda Purusha Pradhanam. Anviya Bhuteshu Vilakshanasya. Gyanasya Chesata Imao Puranam. No. Yeah. No. Word for word. Etal, these two. He, indeed. Vishvashya, of the universe. Cha, and. Bija, the seed. Yoni, in the womb. Ramaha, Lord Balaram. Mukundaha, Lord Krishna. Purushaha, the creating Lord. Pradhanam, his creative energy. His creative energy. Anviya, entering. Bhuteshu, within all living beings. Vilakshanasya, confused or perceiving. Confused. Gyanasya, knowledge. Knowledge. Cha, and. Ishate, control. Imal, they. Purda now, primeval. Okay, translation and purport by the disciples of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. I see. Translation. These two lords, Mukunda and Balaram, are each the seed and womb of the universe, the creator and his creative potency. They enter the hearts of living beings and control their conditioned awareness. They are the primeval supreme. Purport. The word vilakshana means either distinctly perceiving or confused, depending on how the prefix V is understood in context. In the case of enlightened souls, vilakshana means perceiving the correct distinction between the body and the soul. And thus, Lord Krishna, as indicated by the word ishate, guides the spiritually advancing soul. The other meaning of vilakshana, confused or bewildered, clearly applies to those who have not understood the difference between the soul and the body, or the distinction between the individual soul and the supreme soul. Such bewildered living beings do not go back home, back to Godhead, to the eternal spiritual world, but rather achieve temporary destinations according to the laws of nature. It is understood from all Vaishnava literature that Sri Ram, Balaram, here accompanying Lord Krishna, is not different from him. Being his plenary expansion, the Lord is one, yet he expands himself, and thus Lord Balaram in no way compromises the principle of monotheism. Agyan Samanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Kshashumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishnam Stapitanyena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanshakapatrubhyashta Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur-Bhattacharya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya, Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for coming. There's so many people to offer gratitude, just ISKCON in general, and all the devotees serving here for many years. But first and foremost, I'd like to offer my gratitude to my mother and my brother, His Grace Jaya Jagannath Prabhu. So as usual, I'll start with the quote that sets the theme of what we'll be discussing today. And it's a quote by Bernard Daly, whoever that is. He writes, quote, when they discover the center of the universe, a lot of people will be disappointed to discover they are not it, end quote. So I'll repeat that, quote, when they discover the center of the universe, a lot of people will be disappointed to discover they are not it, end quote. So in this regard, it should be pointed out that today's verse describes that Lord Krishna is the seed and womb of the universe. What does that mean? That means Krishna is the center of the universe. So why do conditioned souls like us imagine ourselves to be the center of the universe? Because we're shallow. Therefore, the Bhagavatam describes the distinction between a deep person, and a shallow person. The Bhagavad Gita in chapter 3, verse 27, Lord Krishna describes what a shallow person is. Prakrite kriyamanani gunayi karmani savashaha ahankara vimudama kartaham iti manyate. Krishna says the spirit soul, bewildered by ahankar, false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are actuality are carried out by nature. And who's behind nature? Krishna. And so in this regard, this reminds me of, I think I mentioned it many times before, but it's a very profound point that Prabhupada makes. Unfortunately, I don't have the reference, but one time Srila Prabhupada was in Australia, and he was talking to a group of scientists, and he told one scientist, he says, you are a scientist, and you have a good brain, but you cannot manufacture the brain. But who has manufactured your brain? So Prabhupada finally says, we are glorifying the brains of the scientists, but we are not glorifying the scientist who has made the brain of the scientist. So what is Srila Prabhupada saying? He's saying, if we cannot create the brain, then how can we take credit for anything created by the brain? To do so is known as false ego. And we see when we have this false ego makes us very shallow. So what does it mean to be shallow? Well, there was a nice analogy I heard, and the contrasting point is described in our Shastra. But as far as the shallow person is concerned, in one lecture, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj made a profound point. He says, just as a puddle of water increases in size when there's rain and decreases in size when there's drought because it's shallow, so also a shallow person, they increase in happiness when they receive the rain of honor and decrease in happiness when they receive the drought of dishonor. And so we see that when the common foolish people glorify the scientists, you are so brilliant, you have amazing brains. What will happen? The scientists increase in happiness. Why? Because they're shallow. They have this false ego. But what did Prabhupada tell the scientists? You guys are brainless idiots. And Krishna, he has the brain. You're brainless. And so in this way, the scientists presumably decreased in happiness. Why? Because they were shallow. They took credit for something that which they shouldn't have took credit for. And so what's the solution to this shallow problem, this false ego we have in this world? Well, the Gita describes in chapter 2, verse 70, it says, Aporyamana machala pratishtam, samudram apar parvishanti yavatavat kamayam parvishanti sarve sashanti mamnoti nakamakami. It says, samudra. In order to become free from this shallow mentality, then samudra, become like the ocean, my friend. That sounds like something Bruce Lee would say. So this word samudra means ocean. And there's also a similar verse, before I get to the analogy, there's Psalm 11th Canto, chapter 8, verse 6. It says, because it's so deep. In much the same way, those whose humility is deep like an ocean, their happiness doesn't increase when they receive the reign of honor because they have no false ego, nor do they become, nor does their happiness decrease when they receive the drought of dishonor. Why? Because they're deep. They have no false ego. They don't take credit for things that Krishna has given us. Just like if you tell a beautiful woman, you are so beautiful. Look like. So if we cannot create the brain, we cannot even see our face. That means we cannot create the face. Then how can we take credit? Why are we increasing the happiness when people glorify our beauty, our riches, our fame, our knowledge, our renunciation? To do so is known as ahankar, false ego. And due to this false ego or this shallow mentality, then our happiness will always increase and decrease. It'll always fluctuate. So if you want steady happiness, then become like the ocean. Shanti, if you want peace, and then become like the ocean, my friend. And so, now in this regard, I'd like to mention there's many verses and purports by Prabhupada in the Bhagavatam that describes that the great souls, they are always either free from this false ego, this shallow mentality, or they're always praying to the Lord to please liberate me from this shallow mentality. And so there's, like I said, there's many verses, but I'll quote a couple of them to emphasize this point and the humble, deep mentality of the great souls. So in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 4, verse 23, Shukadeva Goswami says, quote, I'm actually butchering the verse, but he says, quote, may the Supreme Personality of Godhead be pleased to decorate my statements. And we never hear scientists say that. Decorate. Why? Because they're a false ego. So Shukadeva Goswami, Lord, please give me your mercy, decorate my statements so that I may say something beneficial for others. So this is what our mentality should always be when we're discussing not only a spiritual discourse, but any discourse, material discourse. So we always beg for the mercy of the Lord. So in Prabhupada's purport to this verse, he writes, quote, as a fully dependent devotee, Shukadeva Goswami, unlike a mundane man who is proud of his own capability, invokes the pleasure of the personality of Godhead so that his statements may be successful and be appreciated by the hearers. The devotee always thinks of himself as instrumental for anything successfully carried out, and he declines to take credit for anything done by himself. The godless atheist wants to take all credit for activities, not knowing that even a blade of grass cannot move by the direction of the Supreme Lord. End quote. So there's also a similar verse in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, verse 30. And this is a verse by Lord Brahma. So Lord Brahma says, quote, O my Lord, the unborn, you have shaken hands with me, just as a friend does with a friend, as if equal in position. I shall be engaged in the creation of different types of living entities, and I shall be occupied in your service. I shall have no perturbation. But I pray that all this may not give rise to shallow pride, as if I were the supreme. End quote. So in Prabhupada's purport to this verse, he writes, quote, this is actually it's a long purport, but in the last paragraph of this purport, Prabhupada writes, quote, devotees of the Lord are engaged in the specific duty offered by the Lord, and such duties are successfully carried out without hindrance because they are ordained by the Lord. The credit of success goes not to the doer, but to the Lord. But persons with a poor fund of knowledge take the credit of success into their own accounts and give nothing to the credit of the Lord. That is the symptom of the non-devotee class of men. End quote. And so in this way, we can understand that why we should become free from pride and envy. You know, when people glorified us, we become proud. Why? Shallow pride or the false ego. And when people dishonor us or honor somebody else, we become, our happiness decreases. Why? Because we're shallow. That's almost like, when we become envious, that's basically like saying the Lord, the Supreme Lord, he's envious of himself. There's many verses where Krishna says in this verse from the Gita, chapter 15, verse 15, he says, I am the source of all knowledge. Jnanam. From me comes all knowledge. And so if in chapter 7, Krishna says, I am the ability in man. So if everything is coming from Krishna, then why become proud of one's ability? You shouldn't become proud. That's the Lord giving you that ability. And why should you become envious? It's the Lord giving you that ability. So the Lord is actually doing everything, and we're all his instruments. So if we become envious, that's like, and that's another form of envy of the Lord, actually. But the problem is, when we become envious of the Lord and think of the Lord like the demons, they thought of Krishna in envy, and they got benefit from it because, Krishna shows mercy to those who think of him in appreciation, or those who think of him in appreciation and love, and those who think of him in envy and hate. So he still gives benefits. Krishna says, always think of me. He never says how you should think of him. Of course, it's nice if you think of him favorably, but he gives benefits to those who think of him in any way. However, if we think of the devotees of the Lord with envy or hate, then we'll get ourselves in a lot of trouble. So it's not the same thing. So this is there's many examples of that. I won't go into detail. But finally, in today's verse, it describes that, as mentioned before, that Krishna is the seed and womb of the universe. The seed and womb of the universe. So what does that mean? Just like when you plant a seed in the ground, and what is the ground? Mother Earth, the womb, right? So Krishna's both. He's both the seed and he's the womb. He's everything. So aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajate mam buddha bhava samavitaha. Krishna says, I am the source, power source of everything. Those who are wise connect to me. So he's the source of everything in existence. Aham bija pradapita. He's the father, he's the mother. So he's not only the seed of the universe, he's the womb. He's Mother Earth also as well. Everything comes from him. So we could see that if you plant a seed in the ground, in the womb of Mother Earth, what happens? A tree grows. So Prabhu, what's the center? If you had to choose an option, what is the center of a tree? What would you say is the center of a tree? Any questions? Mother Krishna Archana? What is the center of a tree? If anyone had to choose, like Krishna's the center of the universe, right? And or the foundation. And so as far as the tree is concerned, what is the foundation or the center of the tree? Bingo. So I think I had to use the word foundation to make the point more clear. Exactly. So the center of a tree, or the foundation of a tree, is its roots. And so there's a nice verse in the Bhagavatam. It's a famous verse that Prabhupada will quote often, 4th Canto, chapter 31, verse 14. It says, Yatataror mula nishechanena trim yanti tatskanda bujo pashakaha pranoba haracha yatindriyanam tataiva sarvahanam achuteja. So this verse, I just learned it, so I should have learned it a long time ago. So it's not coming out with flow, but it's a very famous verse that Prabhupada will quote often. And so he says in this verse, in this Bhagavatam verse, it says, just as by pouring water on the roots of the tree, all the twigs, branches, and leaves become nourished. And similarly, by giving food to the stomach, then the entire body is nourished. In much the same way, when a person serves the roots of existence, or the stomach of existence. The stomach of existence doesn't sound as nice. Krishna's the stomach of existence. So when you serve the roots of existence, then all other worship is included. Devarshi bhutatam ninam pitrinam na kenkado nayam rinin charajam. Sarvatmanam ya shananam shananyam gatom mukundam parihirtar katam. This is a famous verse from the 11th canto chapter. I forgot which chapter, but it's a famous verse. So this verse says, Deva, by serving the Mukunda, the giver of liberation, then automatically all worship is done. Worship to the Devas, the Rishis, Devarshi Bhutata. What is that, Bhutata? The ghost? I don't know. The ghosts and the goblins? I'm not sure. Devarshi Bhutat Nrinam, the human beings. Devarshi Bhutat Nrinam. Pitrinam, the forefathers. Pitrinam, etc. So all form of worship is done by serving the root of existence. And so now, in the material world, everyone wants to be God, the center of the universe, or the roots of existence, or the foundation of everything, right? But let's examine what is a root and what is a foundation of a building. The tree can be seen, but the root of the tree cannot be seen. And so we see that in much the same way, like Prabhupada says, these sciences, they're taking credit for the sciences can be seen, right? And all their inventions can be seen. But the root of their inventions cannot be seen, Krishna. So Krishna is so humble that he's like the root. You can't see it, but it's the foundation of everything. Krishna never comes and descends in this world and say, hey, sciences, that's my Nobel Prize. Unlike conditioned souls, just like plagiarism, when somebody plagiarizes your work, you hire a lawyer and you sue them. Why? Because you take credit. But actually, Krishna could do the same thing with us. But he never hires a lawyer to take us to court for taking credit. Why? Because he's so humble. And so same thing, a foundation. So we see that as far as the tree is concerned, what do people, they glorify apple tree, a peach tree. They never say, that root is so amazing. That apple tree root, no, you can't see the root, so you don't glorify it. So Krishna's, we're taking all of Krishna's glory. He's the foundation of everything. Same with the building. The building can be seen, but the foundation of the building cannot be seen. It's under the building. And so we never, what do people say when they see, like, let's say Sears Tower? Oh my God, that's amazing skyscraper. Have you ever seen somebody, oh my God, that foundation of the building is so incredible. It's so incredible. Have you seen that foundation? No, you can't see the foundation. So Krishna's the foundation of everything. He's the root of everything, but he's so humble that he never takes credit for it. So we see another analogy is that the root of a tree, even though it's the foundation of a tree, it never keeps any, you could say water. So what does that water represent? That water represents glory, praise. And so we see that Krishna's always giving glory and praise, not only to devotees, but to mundane sciences. And the fact that he allows them to be glorified, that means he's allowing it. He's giving it to them, right? And so we never see a root of a tree. When a root of a tree is given water, we never see the root keep water for itself. It distributes the water throughout the entire tree to make all the tree glorious, nourished. In much the same way we see humble devotees, especially Lord Krishna's incarnation as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's supposed to be in the role of a devotee. He gives all glories to others. There's actually a chapter in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, what is it called? Something like the desire tree of devotional service. Something like that. Something with the word tree in it. The desire tree of devotional service. And in that chapter, Lord Chaitanya is describing that he's the main trunk or roots. And he's glorifying so many branches of his devotees. So he gives a list of so many devotees. And so we see in this way that the Lord is always inclined to glorify his devotees and give nourishment to them without taking any credit for himself. Trinadapi suni chena taror ivasahishuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sarahari. So Lord Chaitanya is teaching us how we should become a devotee by giving praise to others and never expecting praise. Just as the root of a tree gives nourishment to others, but it gets no, you could say it gets no recognition. Nobody ever recognizes the root of a tree. And so this is how we can become peaceful. Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ata Eva Shant Bhuti Muti Siddhi Kami Sakali Ashant. This verse was spoken by Lord Chaitanya to Rupa Goswami, and he says, Krishna bhata nishkama ata eva shant. A devotee of the Lord is always shant, peaceful. Why? Because he is nishkama. He has no desires to be the center of the universe. And so when we have desires to be the center of the universe, and when others treat others like the center of the universe, then what? No shanti, no peace. And so this is how we could keep ourselves out of the trouble. When we have no desire to be the center of the universe, and the only desire we should have is to serve the center of the universe. And what does it mean to serve the center of the universe? Just like that verse, Devarshi Bhutata Ninam Pitini Nam Naken Kado Nayam Rini Charajan Savratmanam Ya Shadanam Shadanyam Gato Mukunda Parihita Katam. This verse says, simply by worshiping Mukunda, the giver of liberation, one is not indebted to the devas, the rishis, the human beings, the forefathers. So we could take this verse, if we have you could say a wrong, ungrateful mentality, then we may say, I do not owe anything to anyone. I only owe something to Krishna, and he will absolve my debts. But we see in so many pastimes, what does Krishna say? What does it mean to serve Krishna? That means you serve the devotees. Just like since Aham Bija Pradapita, Krishna's the father of everyone. So suppose there's a wealthy man, and he has many children. And let's say you want to serve that wealthy person, the father. But you say, I do not care about the father's children. Will the father be pleased with you? No, he will not be pleased with you. And so we see that what does it mean to serve the root of existence? That means love God and love thy neighbor as thyself. Very simple. But we make it so complicated. Why? Because we have desires to be the center of the universe all the time. And so I'll quote a couple of verses in regard to the fact that Lord Krishna, especially in the Lord's form as Lord Chaitanya, he's the root of existence, but he never takes credit. Just like the root of a tree cannot be seen, it gives all nourishment to the tree. In much the same way, the Lord, he gives all praise, all glories to others, but he's not trying to take credit for himself. So in the Chaitanya, I'll quote a few verses or purports in this regard. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Adi Leela, chapter 7, the Adi Leela, chapter 7, verse 145, it says, quote, the Supreme Lord, who is greater than the greatest, becomes submissive to even a very insignificant devotee because of his devotional service. The verse actually continues, but I only quoted the first part, the central part. So also in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, the Madhya Khand, chapter 10, verses 47 through 51, it says, quote, the Lord knows how to glorify his devotees. What will he not say? What will he not do for their sake? For his devotees' sake, the Lord will swallow a blazing fire. The Lord yearns to become the servant of his devotees. Lord Krishna does not know anything but his devotees. He does not think even the endless universes are equal to one of his devotees. Anyone who is not pleased with the devotees of Lord Krishna is a wretched sinner. His past must be full of sins. O my brothers and sisters, with your own eyes, please see the glories of the Lord. Please see the glories of the devotees, end quote. So also in Srila Prabhupada's purport, Masaji, can you look up a verse for me? Is that possible? You have your phone with you or no? 7, I'm only going to read part of it because I didn't have time. I was up this morning writing stuff down, but I didn't have time to finish it. So maybe I'll come back to it later. So I'll read part of it though. So this is from the Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 7, chapter 5, verse 12. And it's, I'm reading Prabhupada's purport. So in this purport, Prabhupada writes, quote, everyone should praise another service to the Lord and not be proud of his own service, end quote. Let me quote that again. I may extend the quote once Bhantaji finds the verse and purport. Prabhupada says, quote, everyone should praise another service to the Lord and not be proud of his own service, end quote. So this reminds me of another quote. It says, If you praise, you will be raised. If you complain, you will remain. If you praise, you will be raised. If you complain, you will remain. And what does that mean? Remain in misery. So when we glorify others, then we become happy. And if we vilify others, we become unhappy. And that's a fact. It's just like when you add this root, or you serve the root of the tree, that means what? You're giving nourishment to the entire tree. In much the same way, when we properly glorify the Lord, that means to glorify those connected to the Lord. And what's the result of not properly glorifying the Lord? That's like if you just want to glorify yourself. That's like let's say we're little twigs in this material world, but we think ourselves, a great personality. We're only small twigs, like the twigs of a tree. So that's like watering the twig of a tree. If you exclusively water the twig of a tree, then what happens? It may seem nice at first, some instant gratification, right? You get some instant gratification, like we do all means to get some instant glorification. So the tree gets instant gratification, and we try to get instant glorification. But how long will that last? It won't last very long before some envy arises, before some fault finding, before some criticism. And so that's why I love this verse. It says, if you praise, you will be raised. If you complain, you will remain. And that means remain in misery. So Lord Chaitanya is teaching us, Namo Mahavandanyaya Krishna Prema Hridayate. Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya. Namne Gora Twish Namaha. So what does he say? And so Lord Chaitanya, he's even more merciful than Krishna himself, because Krishna, when he appeared in this world, he predominantly acted. People pretty much knew he was the Supreme Lord. But in Lord Chaitanya's incarnation as the combined incarnation of Radha and Krishna, he taught us how to become a devotee of the Lord. So Krishna, although he acted like the root of a tree, he glorified his devotees, but pretty much everyone predominantly knew he was the Supreme Lord. Lord Chaitanya, he predominantly acted like devotee, although occasionally people knew he was the Supreme Lord. So that's the difference. So therefore, Krishna Prema Pradayate. What does that mean? Krishna Prema Pradayate. Lord Chaitanya is giving Krishna Prema, the liquid love of Krishna Prema, to everyone. Just like a root. What does it give? It gives water to the entire tree. So Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, he's the root of existence, and he gives Krishna Prema Pradayate. He gives this unconditional, unmotivated love to everyone. And so this is what our mentality, he's teaching us how to become a devotee. And so this is the lesson we can take. So therefore, Lord Chaitanya, he's known as, what is he known as? Chana Avatar. Chana. Channa. Avatar. Chana. What does Chana Avatar mean? Chana means covered. He's covered. He's the covered incarnation. And so what does that mean? Just like a root of a tree. You can't see it. It's covered. The foundation of a building, it's covered. And so there's a few verses I'll reference for your reference. I'm not going to quote the verses or the purports, but for your reference, the reference that Lord Chaitanya is this Chana Avatar who's giving Krishna Prema Pradayate to all of his devotees and to people in general. So this is described in a few verses from our scriptures. One of them is the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 6, verse 99. And so it's also described in the Bhagavatam, in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 3, chapter 16, verse 22. And also finally in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, chapter 18, verse 35. So you can read those verses, those purports where Prabhupada elaborates on how Lord Chaitanya is the Chana Avatar, the covered incarnation, because he's also described as Tri Yuga Avatar. Or the Lord is described as Tri Yuga, meaning he only appears in 3 yugas, 3 millenniums. Satya Yuga, Dwapara Yuga. What's the other yuga? Treta Yuga. But not in Kali Yuga. But actually he appears in Kali Yuga, but as Chana Avatar, the covered incarnation. So therefore he's known as Tri Yuga, one who only appears in 3 yugas as the Supreme Lord. In Kali Yuga, he's the Chana Avatar, meaning he's covered. He doesn't exalt himself. I'm God. And And that's funny. Krishna knows everything, but he acts like he doesn't know anything. On the other hand, conditioned souls, we don't know anything. We act like we know everything. So that's the difference between us. Krishna is so great. Lord Chaitanya is so great, but he acts like he's so small. Oh, sorry about that. We are so small, but we act like we're so great. And this is actually coming to mind. That port, I believe it's his purport to the upper portion of a hair. That means it's even smaller than any microscopic organism that you could see. Not only that, it's spiritual. It's so small that you cannot see it. But even if, but still, you also cannot see it because it's spiritual. And so what does this mean? We're 1/10,000th the upper portion of a hair. So what does that mean? That means when people ignore us or neglect us, they're actually reminding us of our constitutional position, insignificant. Just like when we die, when we leave our body, nobody can see us, nobody can hear us except the Supreme Lord. But while we're in this body, the soul is so small and the ego is so great, so big. So actually, it's a great fortune when we don't get all the respect, when people neglect us. Why? Because they're reminding us of who we truly are, insignificant. And so Lord Chaitanya is teaching us this humility. Orva bahu kari konha shuna sarva loka nama sutra ganti pada kanta shloka trinada pisuni chena tador eva sahishnuna amani namana dena kirtaniyas sarahari. How often should we remember this verse of Trinada pisuni chena? Well, this verse, Orva bahu kari konha shuna sarva loka nama sutra ganti pada kanta shloka. This verse says we should remember it not some of the time, not most of the time, but all of the time. It says, string this verse on the thread of the holy name and wear it around your neck for continuous remembrance. And as mentioned before, I'll repeat this same analogy before. Just as criminals who escape from prison will cause problems for all of human society. So when our bad qualities escape from us through our words and our actions, they cause problems for us and potentially for others, problems for others. So how does the government subdue criminals? With security guards. So it's described in all our teachings, Yasyasti Bhaktir Bhagavati Kinchana Sarva Gunais Tatra Samasate Suraha. A wise person subdues the bad qualities with good qualities. Sarva Gunai means good quality. We subdue pride with humility, envy with appreciation, and vengeance with forgiveness. And so as mentioned before, there's a nice quote. It says, as long as a word remains unspoken, you are its master. Once you utter it, you are a slave. So therefore, Lord Chaitanya says, or this verse says, Sarva Loka. Sarva Loka, we should remember this shloka all the time, just like criminals. Criminals should be subdued all the time. Not some of the time, not most of the time, but all the time. So we should always remember this verse. And in this way, we'll keep ourselves out of a lot of trouble. We won't try to slander other devotees because they neglect us or they disrespect us. They're just actually, we should be very grateful for them. Very grateful. Thank you. You remind me of who I truly am. Insignificant. And so we see when people think they're the center of the universe and they don't realize that they're insignificant, then what happens? You commit so many demoniac things to others. And we see it going on throughout the world, throughout history. And so this is the lesson we should take from our teachings from Lord Krishna, but especially from Lord Chaitanya in this day and age, in this Kali Yuga. So anyways, the last point I would like to discuss is that there's a very nice verse. Actually, I believe this is the chapter in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where it's entitled The Desire Tree of Devotional Service. So I actually reference in my notes a very nice verse, a famous verse. It comes after the verse, Bharta Bhumi Te Hoila Manusha Jamaya Jama Sataka Kari Kara Pada Upakar. So I believe this is in a previous verse that I'm looking at right now. So this verse I just quoted is from the Adi Leela chapter 9, verse 41, I believe. And it says, one who has taken his birth in India should make his life perfect and then give Krishna consciousness, make other people's lives perfect by giving Krishna consciousness to others. Barta bhumi te hoila manusha jamaya jamasataka karikarapada upakar. Give Christian consciousness to others. Our life's perfect. Tree not a pisuni chain. And we act as that roots of the tree. We give praise, but we don't expect praise. That's how we make a life perfect. And so then is the next verse. It describes exactly what this means. And Lord Chaitanya, he's saying in the Adi Leela, chapter 42, verse 43. He says, quote, "It is the duty of every living being to perform welfare activities for the benefit of others with his life, wealth, intelligence, and words. By his work, thoughts, and words, an intelligent man must perform actions which will be beneficial for all living entities in this life and the next," end quote. So Lord Chaitanya says, give your life, give your wealth, give your intelligence, and give your words. And so there are many examples in our scriptures of great devotees who sacrifice their either their wealth, either their food, or either their life. So Bali Maharaj is in the Bhagavatam, Canto 8, chapter 20, verse 10. It describes that Bali Maharaj gave away. He was, you could say in modern terms, or if I had to calculate it, he's probably more than a billionaire or trillionaire. He had basically owned the wealth of the entire universe. But he gave it all away. He sacrificed all of his wealth for the Lord. And we're not saying as a petition for our temple, give away all your money in the hundi bots. We're not advocating for that. So anyways, Bali Maharaj, he gave away all of his wealth. Now, Ranti Dev, without going into details since I don't have time for these stories, but you could reference, that's why I'm referencing them so you can read the details of the stories. So Ranti Dev in Canto 9, chapter 21, verse 13, 9:21:13, it's described that Ranti Dev, he was a king, and he went on a great fast. And after this fast, he was given a sumptuous meal. And so a Brahmana, a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, Chandala, first, second class, third class person, and even dogs came to him for his food. Now he went on a fast for like 38 days or something. And without this food and water, he would die actually. He would die. But when a first class person, second class person, third class person, and the lowest class person came to him for his food and water, he gave it all to them. And he says, if me giving you my food and water, me sacrificing my food and water will cause you to have happiness in your heart and to live, then I know my life was meaningful. And so in this way, it's described that the demigods appeared to Ranti Dev. They says, we were the first class person, we were the second class person, we were the third class person, we were the lowest class person. In this way, the Lord is always testing our characters. And so he tested the demigods appeared to them, and they says we were the first class, second class, third class. We pretended to be homeless. So there's a nice verse in the Bible in the book of Hebrews. I forgot which chapter or verse, but it says, "Do not fail to show hospitalities to strangers, because some have entertained angels without knowing it." Do not fail to show hospitality to strangers, because some have entertained angels without knowing it. So we may think, oh, I'll only show respect to people if I know they're angels. Who's the angel? Mamai Vamso Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana Hamana Shishtani Indriyani Prakriti Stani Karshati. Everyone is an angel. Why? Because Mamai Vamso Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Everyone's an angel. Why? Because we're a part and parcel of Krishna, a Amsha, a part of Krishna. That means everyone's divinely. We're all covered by this body. We're all angels in the sky. Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shune Chaiva Swapake Cha Pandita Sama Darshina. A wise person sees that actually everyone's an angel in disguise. They don't make any distinction between, oh, this is a great devotee, this is an angel, he could be an angel in disguise. No, you don't make any distinction. That way you won't be guilty of committing any offenses also. So this is actually a safe mentality to have. We deal with we focus on the love, and Krishna will focus on the justice. That should be our main consideration. Otherwise, if you want to gamble, then that's one of our four regular, no gambling, right? No gambling. And so if you want to gamble, we could get ourselves in a lot of trouble. So the whole point is that Ranti Dev Bali gave away all his wealth. Rantide gave away all his food. And Didichi, in the 6th canto, chapter 10, verse 7, Didichi literally gave away his life. He gave away, long story short, the demigods, they wanted to defeat a demon named Vitrasura. And the only weapon that would kill Vitrasura was Didichi bones. It's described that they needed Didichi's bones to make into like a powerful weapon to kill Vitrasura. So they literally went up to Didichi. My dear Didichi, the only way we'll kill this demon Vitrasura is you're gonna have to kill yourself. And we're gonna have to use those bones. And what did Didichi say? He was like, sacrifice for others, how to sacrifice in all these pastimes. And so we may argue, I cannot give away all of my money like Bali Maharaj. I cannot give away all my food like Ranti Dev. And I cannot give away to sacrifice some of your words. And so can you say, we may argue, giving away my money, giving away my food, that's too expensive. But can we say, giving away my words, my praise, that's too expensive. It costs too much. It doesn't cost too much. It's actually costly if you don't give it away. So we see when these great sinners like Shishupal, he was envious of Krishna. What was he doing? He wasn't giving any praise. He was envious of Krishna. And so it's described that he only had 100 chances to vilify Krishna. He vilified Krishna once. He vilified Krishna twice. Krishna says you only have 100 opportunities to vilify because why does Krishna do that? The lesson is that unless Krishna chastises us, we'll never learn our lesson. And so he gave us a warning. So in much the same way in our life, this Bhagavatam is a warning. It's a warning. And unless we either we voluntarily listen to the warning or voluntarily, or then we'll have to involuntarily suffer like Shishupal. So Shishupal, he vilified Krishna once, twice, 3 times. In this way, finally, 100 times Krishna wind up killing him. And so we see that for not offering praise to others, and we see that in the material world, some news anchor, they don't offer any praise to others. They just criticize. And in this criticism, you may criticize somebody either by saying a racist word, a sexist word, etc. Then what happens? You may lose your family. You may lose your fame. And ultimately, what does that mean? Your fame, your job, that means your money. So we see that in the material world. Nobody ever gets in trouble for offering too much praise to others. But we see people get in trouble for even offering a little I'm a man of words, so I'll rephrase this. Nobody ever gets in trouble for offering too much respect to others. But we see throughout history that people get themselves in trouble for even offering a little disrespect. And so this is the lesson we can take in our own life, the same lesson. Trinadapi Suni Chena. And so there's a nice quote. It says, it takes many good deeds to acquire a good reputation and only one bad deed to lose it. And so we see that for offering even a little disrespect, people, Hiranyakashipu, he was criticizing Prahlad, Shishupal criticized Krishna, Daksha criticized Lord Shiva. So for even a little disrespect, they lost everything. And so we cannot say, we may say, I can't, my money is too expensive. Give away all my money is too expensive. Give away all my food is too expensive. But we cannot say, give away my words. That's too expensive. It costs too much. No, it doesn't cost too much. It's actually very costly if we don't give it away. and so there was one other thing that I forgot to mention that came into mind. But anyways, finally, the final lesson I will mention is that what Lord Chaitanya taught us is that in this world, we see that when you offer, let's say when you offer so much, you give so much to others, you give so much love, you give so much praise, many gifts, that people may, a few weeks ago or last week, I don't remember, Jamada Agni, the father of Lord Parashram, Jamada Agni served Katavirya Arjuna and his entire army with so much love, gifts, prasadam. And Katavirya Arjuna betrayed them. He stole the source of his livelihood, his his kamandenu cow. So in our relationships, sometimes you could do so much for others and they could betray you. That's the lesson. And similarly in the Bible, Jesus, he taught us a great lesson, and so did Jabda Agni, the same lesson of these great saints. And at the Last Supper, and there's a pastime in the Bible known as the Last Supper, and the Last Supper means the last dinner that Lord Jesus was going to have before he was crucified. And so at the Last Supper, Jesus has 12 disciples, and at this Last Supper, he went to his 12 disciples, and he told his 12 disciples, one of you will betray me. And then he went about his business as if nothing happened. He didn't interrogate, just like if we find out somebody's going to betray us, we try to do an investigation, we follow them, we interrogate others to find out. No, Jesus taught us a lesson. So who betrayed them? Jesus' disciple, Judas, betrayed them. Judas' disciple took money from, you could say, Jesus's antagonist. He took a bribe. They asked Jesus' disciple. They says Judas went to these criminals, those who crucified Jesus. So he asked them, "What will you give me if I turn over Jesus to you?" And so they offered them some money, some silver. And so there's a nice quote. It says, "Men make counterfeit money. In many more cases, money makes counterfeit men." And so we see people are willing to betray friendships all over money or over some fame. If I could get some fame, and if I could slander or criticize my friend and get that fame, then I'll do it. So we see, or money. People betray over money. People betray each other over fame. But what is Jesus teaching us? That famous verse, "Lord, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." He was crucified. And so what is he teaching us? He's teaching us, like all the great saints in our scriptures are also teaching how to become Atmarama. What is Atmarama? Self-satisfied. Self-satisfied in your relationship with the Lord. And what does that mean? There's a nice quote. I know more quotes than verses. It says, "A bird sitting in a tree is not afraid of the branch breaking because her trust is not in the branch, but in her own wings." Narayana Padasari Nakutashna Bibiati Swarga Apavarga Nadakeshu Apituliyata Darshinaha. So, a great soul, they do not care whether they're put in hellish or heavenly situations because their faith, what is that faith?